Hi, Simon Chappell here. I'm the Quit Alcohol Coach, and as always, I want to make sure you smash your sobriety. Today, I want to talk about what to do when people ask you why you're not drinking alcohol. But before I do, if you enjoy the videos on my channel, please make sure you subscribe. You can click the little red button on the screen right now. And I'd also love you to pre-order my new book, How to Quit Alcohol in 50 Days, which you can do on Amazon right now. So let's talk about what you should do when somebody asks you why you're not drinking. There's loads of summer barbecues going on at the moment and parties, especially as people start to come out of lockdown. And it can be a real challenge if you've committed to living an alcohol-free life or taking a break from alcohol. And you have to face your friends and family and they're all drinking around you and challenging you as to why you're not having a beer or wine at the event that you've gone to. And I want to make sure you're fully prepared, you know how to deal with it. It was an experience that I went through myself when I quit. And sure, it was a real challenge, but I made sure I took steps ahead of time to put myself in the best possible position to set myself up for success. And I want that for you as well, which is why I made this video. Now, there's other videos on my YouTube channel that talk specifically about how to handle social events. So you might want to watch those as well. But here today, we're specifically talking about what to do when somebody asks you why you're not drinking alcohol. But I'll give you a couple of tips that you should deploy anyway that have worked really well for me and many other people in social situations when you're sober. One of the best tips is to keep a glass in your hand and keep it full. You might have taken your favorite alcohol-free Prosecco or alcohol-free beer with you to a party or a barbecue. Or if you're at another event at a venue, you might make sure that you have alcohol-free beer or something with tonic water in it. Or if you're at an event at a venue, a hotel, a pub, or a restaurant, you want to make sure that you've got a drink that you really like. And it can be worth phoning the venue ahead before the event to make sure they've got something that you'll enjoy. If they don't have something you'll enjoy, ask if you can bring your own alcohol-free drink with you. Most venues are not going to have a problem with that. But by keeping a glass in your hand, especially if it's an alcohol-free Prosecco or an alcohol-free beer, most people are simply going to assume that you're drinking alcohol. They're not going to ask you why you're not drinking. So this will avoid the number of people who might raise the topic. And believe me, not many people do. They're few and far between. And generally, it's the people who are concerned about their own drinking who bring the subject up. They want to put their mind at ease about the fact that they know they've got a problem with alcohol and probably they don't want to face up to it. So they will ask questions as to why you're not drinking in order to rationalize it in their own mind and soothe themselves that actually they haven't got a problem. You're not drinking because you're on medication. Everything's fine in their world. They can carry on drinking as they were. Whereas if you told them you weren't drinking because you had a problem with alcohol and it was destroying your life, it might cause them some concern. And that's where you need to be prepared in terms of what you're actually going to say. But a couple more tips for social events. First of all, I always make sure I've got an exit strategy. Drunk people can get really annoying after a couple of hours. You tend to find when you're not drinking that the fun stops 2 or 3 hours into the event. As drunk people start to get loud, they stop listening to what you're saying, they're spraying your face with spit, and they're repeating themselves. It just doesn't become fun any longer. So having an exit strategy makes complete sense. And also that can really help if you find that you are being triggered to drink alcohol. I also recommend sticking with like-minded people. If there's other people who don't drink at an event that you go to, try and align yourself with them if possible. And ideally go with somebody to the event who is supportive of what you're doing, who knows that you've quit drinking and will have your back. They'll be there for you when you need them. That can provide you with the support that you really need if any triggers come up or you need to leave early or you're just finding it overwhelming or challenging. But the fact remains that those sort of events, barbecues and parties, family gatherings, people do ask why you're not drinking. As I say, you can keep a glass in your hand and that will minimize the amount that it happens. But certainly for me, I do get asked from time to time why I haven't got an alcoholic drink in my hand. And in my opinion, you've got 3 options when that happens. And I'd like you to think about it ahead of time so you feel prepared, you feel ready for that situation if and when it arises. The first option is complete honesty, where you just tell them your story, you tell them exactly why you're not drinking. And I'll come on to each of these in a moment. The second option is to have a blunt response. And I know somebody who does this. A blunt response is simply saying, no, thank you, and changing the subject, or I'm not drinking today, and moving on to a different topic. You just give a very blunt, short answer, and then you move the conversation onto a different topic. So, for example, it might be, no, thank you, what a lovely kitchen you've got, or no, thank you, this party's amazing. And talking of parties, I think another great strategy you can use while you're at those sort of events is not to make your event about alcohol. In the past, when we've been to those kind of events, I don't know about you, but all I was thinking about was booze and drinking. Whereas nowadays, I'll be thinking about the food. I'll be thinking about the party games that might be being played, or what music they're going to have. And I try and get involved in those things. I might play with the kids if they're having some children's games. I might help with the food if somebody's cooking, or I might take control of the music, which normally annoys everybody because most people don't have the same taste as me. But I'll get involved in all those different things, and that makes it not about alcohol. Now, the third thing that you can do in terms of strategies for telling people who ask you why you're not drinking is to take an approach of making an excuse. Now, personally, I didn't really do this. I've used it once or twice, but I like to live by a value of honesty, so it didn't really sit comfortably for me. However, for some people, this works really well. So let's look at a few excuses that can work really, really well so that you've got something to arm yourself with. And you might find in the early weeks, the early months of sobriety, this is exactly what you need. And nobody's going to judge you for doing that. And then you might find as you move forward on your journey, you adopt an approach of honesty, or you use more of a blunt answer and change the subject. And I'll come on to honesty after we've looked at some of the excuses that you can make. One of the most common excuses people use is to say that they're on medication. It can bring it to an abrupt halt and end the conversation. And again, you can change the subject once you've said it as well, rather than dwelling on it if you don't want to get into it all. So that one can work really well. I've also heard people say that they're in training for a marathon or a half marathon or a triathlon, some kind of sports event, and they've cut alcohol out during that time. Another excellent one you can use, and this is kind of honesty as well, is to say that you're taking a break from alcohol. You want to see what happens for you during that time, and you're just treating it as an experiment to see what changes for you over the 30 or 60-day break that you've committed to. So that one can work quite well because it sits somewhere in between making an excuse and telling the truth. Of course, you can also say you're driving, or actually drive to the venue, and then you're not lying to anybody. You're not making an excuse. So driving is another really good one. Of course, some people will counter what you say. They might tell you to get an Uber or a taxi at the end of the night and come on, have a drink anyway. So you need to be prepared for that, what people might come back at you with if you give them a particular excuse. So you really want something that's going to kill it dead. It's going to end that conversation and nobody's going to challenge you, which is why medication can work really, really well. I've also heard people say that alcohol gives them headaches, they're allergic to alcohol, or that they just don't feel well on that occasion, so they don't really fancy drinking in that moment. And all of those can be an excellent way just to draw a line under the question you've been asked around why you're not drinking today. And you could also use humor. Some people might say something along the lines of, I make enough stupid decisions when I'm sober. You don't want to see me drunk. Or I've drunk enough alcohol for 2 lifetimes. I'm not having any more. And this is bordering back to honesty again, because you're kind of inviting more questions around, well, so you don't drink at all then. So do think about what you're saying and where that might lead in the conversation. In the past, I've said to people, I'm an all or nothing person, and today it's nothing. That works quite well, but it always invites more questions. People will say, oh, so how long have you not drunk for? And they'll want to know more. So I found that I adopted a strategy of complete honesty. Now, you could be really blunt and say something like, I'm a recovering alcoholic. Personally, I don't identify with those terms, but that's going to really open up a conversation and it will kill it dead. Nobody's going to offer you an alcoholic drink if you say that. Personally, I say that I don't drink. It was a lifestyle choice because I was putting alcohol in front of the most important things in my life. It was taking over my life and I decided to quit. And that was a lifestyle choice that I made for me. And since I quit, everything's improved. Everything's got better. I feel happier. My anxiety's reduced. And it's one of the most wonderful things that I've ever done. Of course, people are then going to start asking you questions around that, but it can be a really positive conversation if you feel confident enough to do it. And many people who do ask the questions actually start telling you how they're worried about their own drinking or how they think they should cut down on their own alcohol. I've never had anybody become judgy or preachy or tell me that actually, why don't you just have one drink, after I've opened up to them in that way. And I do use a traffic light system, which you might have heard me mention before. If I have a red traffic light for a person, I feel like they're not safe to tell my innermost story to. And I might just be quite blunt with them and say, no thanks, I'm not drinking today, and change the subject. If somebody's got an amber light, I feel that they're fairly safe. I'll probably open up to them a bit and I might tell them a bit of my story, but I'll proceed with caution. And if somebody's got a green light, I feel that they're completely safe and I'm happy to tell them my entire story. And I use that traffic light system in other areas of my life as well, because I tend to overshare. You might have noticed that from my videos. So I take the time now to judge whether somebody's a red, amber or green light, and based upon that I'll gauge how safe they are to share personal information with. And I think that's an excellent way as you move through life in terms of knowing who you should tell and what you should tell them. I think one of the best excuses I heard was from somebody in one of my Facebook groups. They were asked why they weren't drinking when they were at a barbecue, and they simply replied, alcohol gives me gas and you really wouldn't want to experience that. And then they paused and shook their head and said, really, it's horrifying. It made the other person feel quite awkward, but they didn't ask them any more questions. It brought it to an abrupt end. So if you feel confident enough, you could use something like that. And there's a list on my website, besober.co.uk, of all of the excuses that you can potentially use. And as I say, I think a lot of people do turn to those in the early stages of sobriety. There's probably about 50 or so on my website that you can scroll through and you can find something that might work for you. And some of them, as I mentioned, do cross over between honesty and an excuse. You're kind of telling the truth, but in a way that really feels like a good fit for you. I can't emphasize enough the importance of being prepared for things like this. I've seen people get caught out where they haven't got an excuse, they haven't got a glass in their hand, and they just get blindsided when somebody asks them why they're not drinking or why don't they join everybody in drinking shots. And it just catches them completely off guard, and it can be a real challenge when that happens. So don't put yourself in that position. Make sure you're prepared, make sure you're ready and armed with the type of approach you want to take when somebody says to you, why aren't you drinking alcohol? What's going on? What's happening? You used to be the life and soul of the party. You were the first one up drinking, the first one dancing, and you were always the last one to go home as we were guzzling shots at 3 o'clock in the morning. Why isn't that happening? So you need to be ready to explain it and do it in a way that feels totally comfortable, totally true to you. And you'll find that it just helps you grow. You grow stronger and you develop as an individual as you do it. And the first time is always the hardest. Once you've done it once or twice, it just gets easier and easier. The other thing to watch out for is in restaurants. I recall not long after I quit, I went out for a meal, and at the end of the meal, the waiter brought over some alcohol shots for us to have as a thank you for our custom. And it just caught me off guard. I didn't want this drink. So just think about those situations as well, whether you're just going to politely say no thank you to the waiter, which works perfectly well. And in some restaurants, you'll find that waiters bring the wine over and they just assume that everybody's going to want the wine, and you find them pouring it in everybody's glass. So turning your glass upside down, removing your wine glass from the table before that happens, or just politely saying no thank you is absolutely fine. You don't need to justify yourself to anybody. And that applies for family, friends, or the wider community when you're out and about. It's your journey and it's up to you what you say. You do not have to justify yourself. And I think that's really important for you to remember. And that's what I want to end this video on, just saying that you don't have to justify yourself. But make sure you set yourself up for success and make sure you know what you're going to do when those situations arise.